Little Elia is still adjusting to finally having her mother back home. Rola Hassanein, a Palestinian journalist from the occupied West Bank, was arrested by Israeli security forces when her daughter was just 9 months old. Now, after 10 months in detention, she is among the first Palestinian prisoners to be freed as part of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire agreement.
بالتأكيد طفلتي فقدت أيضا ملامحي، كانت تشاهد الصور من خلال عائلتي وزوجي يقولون لها بأن هذه والدتك، ولكن الصورة ليست كالحقيقة. كنت أحلم بعض الأحلام فيها. أنا قضيت شهر رمضان وهو الشهر الأول لإيلياء في أحضاني قضيته في الأسر. أول عيد لإيلياء في الحياة قضيته وأنا في الأسر. أول ذكرى ميلاد إيلياء أيضا أنا كنت في الأسر.
This was the moment Rola was reunited with her daughter and husband last week. Having suffered from health complications in the first few months of life, Rola says it was a relief to see her daughter doing well after almost a year of agonizing separation. But Rola herself has also been through unimaginable suffering while in detention.
لم نشرب ماء، لم نتناول طعام، لم نستخدم الحمام، لم نستطيع أن نصلي حتى.
Rola says that the day she and 89 other prisoners were transferred for release as part of the ceasefire deal, they were subjected to hours of psychological and physical abuse. She recalls that they were pushed down to their knees, dragged across the ground while handcuffed, and dressed only in thin layers while out in the cold. They were then made to watch hours of Israeli propaganda video before being released. But, like so many other Palestinians in Israeli jails, abuse and harassment had become a daily occurrence for Rola.
What were the conditions like inside the prison?
خصوصية الأسيرات، ضربوا بعرض الحائط كافة القوانين الدولية التي على الأقل ترعى حق الأسيرات في كثير من الأمور، حتى احتياجاتها الشخصية الذاتية. كان الرجال هناك في الأسر كانوا يقولون لنا ليس من الضروري أن تقوموا بتغيير الفوط الصحية كل ساعة، يمكنكم تغييرها كل 4 إلى 5 ساعات. صادروا منا حتى ملابسنا الداخلية أيضا وتركوا لنا قطعة واحدة فقط. هناك مشاهد كانت لأسيرات من قطاع غزة عندما كانوا يجلبونهم لمعتقل الدامون، كانت بعض الأسيرات بحالة صعبة جدا. في حالة الدورة الشهرية كانت تكون الدماء على ملابسهم بطريقة فظيعة جدا، كانوا يقومون بالاستهزاء عليهم وبهم.
The Israeli prison service has told CNN that they are not aware of any such claims, but the harsh conditions faced by Palestinians in Israeli jails has been widely documented. In a report published in July 2024, the UN Human Rights Office said Palestinian detainees are subjected to systematic beatings, humiliation and threats, in addition to severe restrictions on food, water and essential hygiene products. Like many Palestinians, Rola was tried before a military court rather than a civil court, and later charged with incitement on social media over posts shared where she had expressed frustration over the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza.
هذه ليست سياسة جديدة بأن يحاسب الفلسطيني على فكره، سبق وأن حاسب فلسطينيين كثر على الرسم وعلى كتاب المقالات بأن بسهولة يتم اعتقال الشخص مجرد إدانته بأنه يمارس تحريض على السوشيال ميديا.
For Rola, it is impossible to forget the suffering that she and other Palestinian detainees have been forced to endure. But, she says, her focus now is on enjoying each moment with her daughter and husband.
Now, of course, Rola is one of many stories that we've heard from Palestinian prisoners and detainees who were freed on Sunday, in fact, in the early hours of Monday morning, rather, after hours of delay. But, of course, stories like this, recounts of abuse, of harassment, of being threatened within Israeli jails for Palestinians is something we've heard about quite often, as you saw in that report, not only in the UN Human Rights Office report, but also from the UN Agency of Palestine Refugees, from Amnesty International, and a number of other NGOs and monitoring groups. And of course, this is the first release that we have seen as part of this 42-day process. We are expecting to see more Palestinian prisoners and detainees released every week in exchange for Israeli hostages. Hundreds are set to be released, in addition to yet more Palestinians from Gaza who are also set to be released. So we are expecting, of course, to hear more stories from Palestinians as they are released. But again, accounts like this are deeply troubling.
All right, Nada Bashir, thank you so much for that reporting. My next guest is a former State Department official under the Biden administration who resigned over its handling of the war in Gaza. Hala Raret says the ceasefire agreement signed last week between Israel and Hamas was a matter of political will brought about by the Trump administration. She writes that now the real questions are what was given in exchange and will it last beyond this initial phase? Hala joins us now live from Dubai. Hala, great to have you with us. Quite an important time. In just a few days, we're expecting hostages to return to Israel. We're seeing tensions rising in the West Bank. You've got this military operation happening in Jenin. And the big question as you ask this, are we even going to get to phase 2? And what was given in exchange for the ceasefire hostage agreement? What's your assessment right now?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's becoming increasingly clear that what was given in exchange was the West Bank. It's terrifying to say that, but everything points in that direction. The ceasefire went into effect on Sunday. Then on Tuesday, just 2 days later, not even 48 hours later, the State of Israel announced a large-scale military operation. They're calling it Iron Wall throughout the West Bank, focused in Jenin. And I can't say that that's a coincidence. And that lies right after we're hearing the nominee for the United Nations ambassador, the U.S. Nominee, saying that Israel has biblical rights to the West Bank. It's very concerning. And what we're seeing now is a bit of a carte blanche for collective punishment in the West Bank. So we're keeping a very close eye on seeing what happens and also if the ceasefire in Gaza is actually going to hold.
Yeah, and you make a really important point here when you mentioned the potential new UN ambassador. Trump lifted sanctions on illegal settlers. The PIC, of course, talking about the UN PIC, talking about biblical rights to what is sovereign territory right now. Israel making it very clear that they plan to and intend to annex all of West Bank. What is your sense of how the Trump administration is going to deal with Netanyahu?
Look, there have been mixed signals from Trump himself when it comes to how he's going to deal with Netanyahu. In some regards, he calls him a great friend and an ally. In others, you see that there's a personality clash between the two. But as a seasoned State Department official, I can tell you that it's also about the people he's surrounding himself with. It's about Mike Huckabee, the person he wants to nominate to be ambassador to Israel, who, again, as an evangelical, thinks that Israel has full biblical rights to the entire West Bank and needs to annex the West Bank. Same with the UN ambassador that I just mentioned. So we're going to see how far they are going to push each other, Trump and Netanyahu. But as you mentioned, the lifting of sanctions, again, that was a bare minimum that the Biden administration did, an absolute bare minimum to try to shed light and to try to halt, which it didn't halt, unfortunately, the settler violence against civilians throughout the West Bank.
So President Trump spoke to Saudi Crown Prince, MBS, today. Interesting, because this was the first conversation with a foreign leader since coming into office in terms of what we understand right now. Saudi Arabia has been very clear that they want to see an establishment of a Palestinian state. We know that President Trump is quite transactional. We also know that under the Abraham Accords, there was this hope that Saudi was going to normalize with Israel. How do you see that relationship playing out? Because clearly President Trump does want Saudi on its side.
It's a very critical relationship with Saudi Arabia and with others in the Gulf monarchs. Look, I think it's going to be, like you said, a transaction. And at the end of the day, what's going to be the best for Trump? He has very much an America First policy, but that determines how he interprets that. Again, the people who he's going to surround himself with, who is going to whisper loudest in his ear. He did make campaign promises like ending the war in Gaza, bringing about a ceasefire, but he also had right behind him Miriam Adelson, one of the top donors who is very much in the Zionist camp and wanting to annex the entire West Bank. So there are multiple interests pulling at the new president, and we're going to have to see which one is the loudest. The fact that he spoke to the Saudi Crown Prince as one of his first major call, and perhaps it will also be his first visit, like it was when he first became president during his last term, is going to be significant. So I think we're going to have to watch it very closely. But there is no doubt right now that Netanyahu and his extremist right-wing government is trying to take full advantage of this situation and trying to have collective punishment throughout the West Bank. And we're seeing the horrors that are happening now there as things are starting to calm down in Gaza. So we have to keep a very, very close eye on what is happening in both occupied territories.
Absolutely. And you resigned from the Biden administration after you consistently warned about the way that they were handling the war in Gaza and also the anti-American sentiment that has resulted in this. So big question about what Trump will do next. But President Trump also made interesting comments about Gaza and actually saying that it's a phenomenal location on the sea and so forth. Right now, it's uninhabitable. For the Palestinians, they're going back to what is left of their homes and rubble under the ceasefire. What does the day after look like for you under Trump?
Yeah, his comments were extremely concerning, also saying that it's their war, not our war. No, it very much is ours. All of those weapons that destroyed Gaza, they were all American-made weapons. And again, what I've said publicly multiple times, in violation of U.S. laws, that we continue to funnel all of those weapons to the state of Israel. What the day after looks like is we have to, as an international community, maintain pressure and end Israel's impunity. All of this is a violation of international law, a violation of U.S. laws. And if we want a stable Middle East, if we want a secure state of Israel, if we want the Palestinians to live in any type of dignity, then this vicious cycle of violence has to end. And my hope is that with Arab states putting pressure on the Trump administration as well, the international community, international organizations, which have all called what is happening a genocide and an ethnic cleansing, that the president realizes that this is actually against U.S. national security itself and changes course. The question is, again, who he's surrounding himself with and whether or not their voices are going to be louder than the international community's.